stole my piece. I stole your kingdom.
The first thing I noticed wasn't the handcuffs in her glove compartment. It wasn't even the way Lila had started coming home at 3 in the morning, reeking of cigarettes and cheap cologne. That definitely wasn't mine. No, the first thing that made my stomach drop was simpler than that. She'd stopped wearing her rings. "Morning, beautiful," I said, watching her pour coffee with bare fingers that had worn my grandmother's diamond for 8 years. The kitchen felt different somehow, like the air had gone stale overnight. Lila didn't look up from her phone. "Shane, can you pick up milk on your way home? I'll be late again tonight." Another inventory meeting? I kept my voice casual, but my eyes were locked on those bare fingers. "Third one this week. Business is booming." She finally glanced up, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Annoyance? Some of us actually care about making money. That stung. I'd been working my tail off as a project manager for Kellerman Construction for 12 years, working my way up from carrying tools to overseeing million-dollar builds. But Lila had always made it clear that my blue-collar paycheck wasn't quite enough for her tastes. "Right, well, try not to work too hard," I said, watching her grab her purse and head for the door. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Oh, and Shane, I'm thinking of redecorating the living room. Something more modern. Less, less what? Less us." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with my coffee and a growing certainty that my marriage was circling the drain. I'd suspected something was off for months. The late nights had started in January, right after New Year's. At first, Lila claimed she was helping her friend Candy with some business venture. Then it became consulting work. Now it was these mysterious inventory meetings that apparently required her to dress like she was hitting the club scene. But it was the little things that really got to me. The way she'd started showering immediately when she got home, how she'd moved her phone charger to her side of the bed and kept the screen face down, the fact that she'd suddenly developed an interest in expensive lingerie that I never got to see her wear. And now, no rings. I finished my coffee and headed out to the job site, but my mind kept wandering. By lunch break, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I called my brother Eddie. "Eddie Calloway, Private Investigations," his gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "It's Shane, I need to talk to you." "Jesus, what time is it? I was up until 4 working a case." "It's noon, you vampire, and I think I need your help." There was a pause. Eddie had been a cop for 15 years before a bullet in the knee and too much department politics drove him to open his own PI business above Murphy's pawn shop downtown. He was good at reading between the lines. "Lila?" he asked. "Yeah." "Come by the office. And Shane, bring a bottle of something strong. Something tells me you're going to need it." An hour later, I was climbing the narrow stairs to Eddie's office, a bottle of Jack Daniels tucked under my arm. The place smelled like old cigarettes and disappointment, with a dash of the Chinese takeout Eddie lived on. Case files were stacked everywhere, and his desk looked like a hurricane had hit it. "So," Eddie said, pouring 2 generous shots, "tell me what you know." I laid it all out. The late nights, the changed behavior, the missing rings. When I got to the part about finding novelty handcuffs in her car's glove compartment, Eddie raised an eyebrow. "Novelty handcuffs? Pink fur. Not exactly our style, if you know what I mean." "And she said they were for what?" "She didn't. Just laughed it off and said Candy must have left them there." Eddie leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously. "Shane, I gotta ask. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." "I need to know, Eddie, one way or the other." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, give me a week. But I'm warning you now. If I find what I think I'm going to find, there's no going back. You can't unknow what you know." "I understand." "Do you? Because in my experience, the truth has a way of turning decent people into someone they don't recognize." I knocked back my shot, feeling the whiskey burn. Maybe it's time I stopped being so decent. The week that followed was torture. I went through the motions at work, managing the renovation of a downtown office building, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time Lila came home late, every time she dodged a direct question, every time I caught her smiling at her phone, I felt something cold and hard growing in my chest. On Friday, Eddie called. "You free tonight? We need to talk." "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. Come by around 8. And Shane, you might want to eat something first. You're going to lose your appetite. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. When I got to Eddie's office that night, he had a manila folder waiting on his desk, thick with photographs and documents. "Sit down," he said, not meeting my eyes. I sat. "Her name's not on any business license for consulting work," Eddie began. "But there is a business. Club Paradise, down on Mercy Street. You know the area." I knew it. The kind of neighborhood where honest people didn't go after dark. "It's what you'd call a gentleman's club," Eddie continued. "And your wife, Shane, she's not just a customer." He slid a photograph across the desk. It showed Lila in an outfit I'd never seen, something that barely qualified as clothing, talking to a man with slicked back hair and too many gold chains. "That's Victor Renz," Eddie said. "Goes by Vic. He manages the place. And from what I can tell, he's been managing more than just the business, if you catch my meaning." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "How long?" "Best I can figure, about 2 years." 2 years. 2 years of lies, of working late, of coming home and kissing me with lips that had been on another man. 2 years of me being the fool who believed every excuse. "There's more," Eddie said quietly. "More?" "The club. It's not just any strip joint. They run private parties, webcam shows, escort services. And Lila, she's not just an employee. She's a partner. Has been since the beginning." I stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the woman in the picture with the woman I'd married. A partner? Financially speaking, she's been pulling in more money than both of us combined. Cash business, you know? Easy to hide from the IRS, easy to hide from husbands. Jesus Christ. Eddie poured another shot and slid it across the desk. "I'm sorry, Shane, I really am." I drank the whiskey, but I couldn't feel it anymore. I was numb, like someone had injected Novocaine directly into my soul. "What else do you have?" "Photos, financial records, a list of regular clients, some names you'd recognize, city council members, local businessmen, married guys with reputations to protect. And Vic? Vic's got his own problems. Gambling debts, angry bookies, an ex-wife who'd love to know where he's been spending his time. He's not as untouchable as he thinks." I looked at the folder, thick with evidence of my wife's double life. "What would you do, Eddie, if this was your wife?" "I'd make them pay," he said without hesitation. "Every last one of them. Even if it meant becoming someone you didn't like." Eddie's smile was cold. "Brother, sometimes the person you don't like is exactly who you need to be." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my basement workshop, staring at Eddie's folder and planning. By morning, I'd made a decision that would have horrified the old Shane Calloway. But the old Shane was gone, burned away by betrayal and humiliation. The new Shane was going to be much more interesting. First things first, I needed to know everything. Over the next few days, Eddie and I conducted our own investigation. We followed Lila, photographed her meetings with Vic, documented every lie she told me about where she was going and what she was doing. The deeper we dug, the more sickening it became. Club Paradise wasn't just any adult entertainment venue. It was a high-end operation that catered to the city's elite. Married politicians, respected businessmen, pillars of the community who had wives and children at home while they paid for private shows and special services. And Lila was right in the middle of it all. "Look at this," Eddie said, sliding a printout across his desk. "Client list from their computer system." I scanned the names and felt my jaw drop. Holy crap, that's Judge Morrison. And isn't that the mayor's chief of staff? Gets better, check out the payment records. The numbers were staggering. These men were paying thousands of dollars for private sessions, bachelor parties, and what the records euphemistically called companionship services. "She's been making this kind of money for 2 years?" I asked. "At least, and hiding every penny of it." I thought about all the times Lila had complained about money, all the comments about my limited earning potential, all the arguments about the mortgage and car payments. She'd been sitting on a fortune while making me feel like a failure. "I want to hurt them," I said quietly. "Good," Eddie replied, "because I've got some ideas." The plan we came up with was elegant in its simplicity. We were going to expose every single person involved in Club Paradise, but we were going to do it smart. No breaking and entering, no illegal surveillance, no evidence that couldn't stand up in court. Eddie had contacts throughout the city, Former cops, private security, people who owed him favors. Within a week, we had everything we needed. Phase 1, Eddie explained. We contact the wives. He'd put together individual packages for each of the club's regular clients. Photos of their husbands entering and leaving the club. Copies of payment records, even some video footage from public areas that showed them in compromising situations. We send these anonymously? Heck no. We hand deliver them. I want to see their faces when they realize their perfect marriages are built on lies. We started with Mrs. Morrison, the judge's wife. She lived in a pristine colonial in the suburbs, the kind of place where the lawn was always perfect and the neighbors all drove luxury cars. I watched from Eddie's van as he walked up to her front door, manila envelope in hand. Through the window, I could see her face change as she looked through the contents. First confusion, then shock, then a rage that made me glad I wasn't Judge Morrison. One down, Eddie said, climbing back into the van. 15 to go. We spent the entire weekend making deliveries. By Sunday night, half the city's power structure was dealing with furious wives who'd just learned about their husbands' extracurricular activities. But that was just the beginning. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the bank. Lila and I had joint accounts, which meant I had every right to access our financial records. What I found there made my blood boil. For 2 years, she'd been depositing small amounts of cash into a separate account I didn't know existed. Thousands of dollars, carefully structured to avoid triggering any reporting requirements. Money that should have been going toward our mortgage, our future, our life together. Instead, it was funding her secret life with Vic. I made some calls. Turned out that under state law, any money earned during a marriage was considered marital property, regardless of who earned it or where it came from. With Eddie's help, I found a lawyer who specialized in asset protection. By Wednesday, I'd legally frozen every account Lila had access to and transferred half of everything into a trust that only I could touch. It was perfectly legal. Aggressive, but legal. That night, Lila came home earlier than usual. I was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a stack of bank statements. "We need to talk," I said. She looked at the papers and went pale. "Shane, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain 2 years of lying to my face? Can you explain the secret bank accounts, the cash deposits, the fact that you've been living a double life while making me feel like crap about my income? You went through my private accounts? Our accounts, Lila? We're married, remember? Though I notice you stopped wearing the ring that proves it." She sat down heavily, and for the first time in months, she looked at me, really looked at me. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" "I never meant for it to go this far," she said quietly. "It started as just dancing, just a way to make some extra money. But then Vic offered me a partnership, and the money was so good, and you decided to sleep with him while you were at it?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Shane, don't. Just don't. I've seen the photos, Lila. I know about the private sessions, the escort services, all of it. What do you want from me?" I leaned back in my chair, studying the woman I'd thought I'd spend my life with. "I want you to understand something. The man you married, the one who would have forgiven you, who would have worked through this with you, he's gone. You ended him with 2 years of love. So what happens now?" I slid a set of legal documents across the table. "Divorce papers. You can sign them, take your half of what's left, and we can end this quietly. Or you can fight me, and I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of business you've been running." She stared at the papers for a long time. "And if I sign, you disappear, you and Vic and your whole operation. You find another city, another life, and you stay the heck away from mine." "You're not the man I married," she said finally. I smiled, and it felt like winter. "No, I'm not. I'm better." She signed the papers. But as I watched her pack her things that night, I realized something that should have worried me. I wasn't satisfied. The old Shane would have been relieved to have it over with, would have been ready to move on and rebuild his life. The new Shane wanted more. I wanted them all to pay. The next morning, Lila was gone. She'd packed 2 suitcases and left everything else behind: furniture, photos, 8 years of shared memories, reduced to abandoned belongings in an empty house. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt like I was just getting started. Eddie called around noon. "You see the news?" "What news?" "Judge Morrison's wife filed for divorce yesterday. Took out a restraining order, too. Apparently, she found some very interesting evidence about her husband's recreational activities. I felt a cold satisfaction spread through my chest. Good for her. Gets better. Morrison's not the only one. I'm hearing from my contacts that half the club's client list is dealing with angry wives and divorce lawyers. It's like a nuclear bomb went off in the city's social circles. What about the club itself? Still operating. Vic's laying low, but they're still open for business. That bothered me. Lila was gone, but Vic was still out there, still profiting from the business that had destroyed my marriage, still thinking he'd won. I want to pay him a visit, I said. Shane, that's not smart. Guy like Vic, he's got connections, muscle. You go after him directly, you might not come back. I'm not talking about a fight, Eddie. I'm talking about a conversation. That evening, I drove to Club Paradise. It was exactly what I'd expected, a converted warehouse in the industrial district. Neon signs and blacked-out windows. The kind of place that looked seedy even in the dark. I parked across the street and waited. Around 11, Vic emerged from a side door, talking on his phone and laughing about something. He was exactly what I'd pictured from Eddie's photos. Expensive suit, gold chains, the kind of artificial confidence that comes from thinking you're untouchable. I followed him to a downtown parking garage where he'd left his shit. A cherry red Mustang convertible that probably cost more than I made in a year. He was alone, which was perfect. Victor Renz, I called out as he reached for his car door. He turned, and I saw him tense when he didn't recognize me. Do I know you? Shane Calloway, Lila's husband. His face changed, wariness replacing confusion. Oh. Shane, look, man, I don't want any trouble. Neither do I said, walking closer. I just want to talk. Talk about what? About respect, about consequences, about the fact that you've been screwing my wife for 2 years and thinking there wouldn't be a price to pay. Vic's hand moved toward his jacket, and I wondered if he was caring. But I wasn't planning on giving him a chance to find out. Here's the thing, Vic, I continued, stopping just outside arm's reach. I know all about your business. I know about the client list, the escort services, the private parties. I know about your gambling debts and your ex-wife and the fact that you've been skimming money from the club's books. You don't know crap, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I know enough, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to close down Club Paradise. You're going to pay back every penny you stole, and you're going to disappear from this city like you never existed. Vic laughed, but it sounded forced. Or what? Or I make sure everyone knows what you really are. Your creditors, your ex-wife, the IRS, every law enforcement agency in the state. I've got enough evidence to bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Vic entering a hotel room with one of his employees, a married city councilman's wife who'd been paying for private sessions. Am I? His face went white. Jesus Christ, where did you get that? I've got dozens more. Photos, videos, financial records, testimony from girls who are tired of being afraid of you. Want to see them all? Vic looked around the empty parking garage, like he was expecting help to materialize. And what do you want? I told you, close the club, pay your debts, disappear. And if I don't? I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne and see the sweat beading on his forehead. Then I'll destroy you piece by piece. I'll ruin your business, your reputation, your life. I'll make sure you lose everything that matters to you, just like you helped destroy everything that mattered to me. You're crazy. No, Vic, I'm motivated. There's a difference. I turned to walk away, then stopped. Oh, and Vic, nice car. I left him standing there in the parking garage, and I could feel his eyes on me until I disappeared into the stairwell. But I wasn't done with Victor Renz, not by a long shot. The next morning, I called in another sick day and drove to the auto parts store. I bought a bag of sugar, a utility knife, and a can of spray paint. Then I went back to the parking garage. Vic's Mustang was still there, gleaming red under the fluorescent lights. I looked around to make sure I was alone, then got to work. Sugar in the gas tank was an old myth. It wouldn't actually destroy the engine. But it would make the car run rough, cause expensive diagnostic headaches, and generally ruin Vic's day. The slashed leather seats were more direct, and the word cheater spray-painted across the hood was just for fun. I was back home before noon, drinking coffee and feeling better than I had in months. Eddie called that afternoon. You hear about Vic's car? What about it? Someone vandalized it last night. really did a number on it. Vic's running around the club screaming about revenge and calling in favors. And sounds like he's having a bad day. Shane, please tell me you didn't. I didn't do anything illegal, Eddie. I just had a conversation with the man. Right, well, your conversation seems to have made an impression. Word is, he's looking for you. Let him look. But Eddie was right to be worried. That evening, as I was leaving the grocery store, I spotted a black SUV following me. I took a few random turns and it stayed with me. When I pulled into my driveway, it drove past slowly, and I caught a glimpse of the driver, Terry, the club's bouncer, a mountain of muscle who looked like he could bench press a small car. They were watching me. Good. Let them watch. Let them worry. Let them wonder what I was going to do next, because I was just getting started. That night, I sat in my basement workshop surrounded by Eddie's surveillance photos and financial records, planning my next move. The old Shane would have been satisfied with Lila's departure and Vic's vandalized car. But the new Shane wanted to watch their whole world burn, and I was going to make sure it did. 3 days after the parking garage incident, they came for me. I was working late at the Kellerman construction site, finishing up some paperwork in the trailer, when I heard footsteps outside. Heavy footsteps, more than one person, trying to be quiet and failing. I ended the lights and moved to the window. In the glow of the security lights, I could see 2 figures approaching the trailer. Terry, the bouncer, and another man I didn't recognize. Shorter, but just as thick, with the kind of build that comes from prison workouts. They were carrying baseball bats. I had maybe 30 seconds before they reached the door. The trailer had only one exit, which meant I was trapped unless I did something fast. Fortunately, construction sites are full of useful tools. I grabbed a cordless nail tool from the equipment rack and checked the battery, full charge. Then I positioned myself behind the door and waited. The handle turned slowly. Terry stepped inside first, bat raised, squinting into the darkness. His friend followed, and that's when I made my move. Looking for someone? I said, stepping out behind them with the nail tool pointed at Terry's back. They spun around, and I saw Terry's eyes widen when he saw what I was holding. Easy, Shane, he said, raising his hands but not dropping the bat. We just want to talk. Funny way of starting a conversation, I replied. Most people knock. Vic wants to see you. I'm sure he does, but I'm not really in the mood for a social call. The other man, I decided to call him Stubby, took a step forward. You're going to come with us, one way or another. Am I? I adjusted my grip on the nail tool. You know what this thing can do to a human body? 3-inch nails, compressed air, point-blank range. Want to find out? Terry held up a hand to stop his partner. Nobody needs to get hurt here. Then drop the bats and walk away. Can't do that. Then we have a problem. What happened next was pure instinct. Stubby rushed me, thinking he could close the distance before I could react. I squeezed the trigger and put a nail through his shoulder, pinning him to the wall behind him. He screamed and dropped his bat, clawing at the nail embedded in the wood. Terry swung at me, but I ducked and rolled behind the desk. The bat splintered the chair where my head had been a second earlier. Jesus Christ! Terry shouted, staring at his partner. You hit him! Nailed him, actually, I corrected. And you're next if you don't get the heck out of here. Terry looked at Stubby, who was still pinned to the wall and making noises like a wounded animal, then back at me. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. Tell Vic that if he sends anyone else after me, I'll do worse than vandalize his car. I'll bury him. Terry grabbed Stubby and pulled the nail out of the wall, which caused another round of screaming. They stumbled out of the trailer, Stubby clutching his shoulder and leaving a trail of red stains. I waited until I heard their car drive away, then called Eddie. They came after me, I said. Who? Vic's boys. Terry and some other guy. They had bats. Jesus, Shane, are you okay? I'm fine, they're not. What did you do? I defended myself with a nail tool. There was a long pause. Please tell me you're kidding. Dead serious. I put a nail through one of them, pinned him to the wall like a butterfly. Shane, this is escalating beyond what we planned. These guys, they're not going to just walk away now. Good. I'm tired of walking away. Listen to me. Vic's got connections, muscle, money. If you keep pushing him, he's going to push back harder. Let him try. But Eddie was right, and I knew it. The attack at the construction site had crossed a line. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. The next morning, I drove to Eddie's office to plan our next move. He was waiting with coffee and a grim expression. I made some calls, he said. Word on the street is that Vic's putting together a crew. He wants you hurt, Shane. Badly. How badly? Hospital badly. Maybe worse. I sipped my coffee and considered this. Then we need to move faster. Or we could call the cops, report the attack, file charges. With what evidence? Two guys with bats who never actually hit me? Come on, Eddie. You know how this works. He sighed. So what do you want to do? I want to finish this. All of it. The club, Vic, the whole operation. How? I pulled out a notebook where I'd been sketching ideas. We expose everything. Not just to the wives, not just to a few people. To everyone. The whole city. The media? Better, the internet, social media, local news blogs, every gossip site in the state. We make it impossible for them to operate. Eddie studied my notes. This is a lot of work, and it's dangerous. Once we do this, there's no going back. I'm already past the point of no return, Eddie. They came after me with bats. This is self-defense now. All right, he said finally. But we do this smart. No more nail tools, no more vigilante BS. We use the system against them. Agreed. We spent the rest of the morning putting together our media package. Photos of city officials and entering and leaving the club. Financial records showing money laundering and tax evasion. Testimony from employees who were tired of being exploited, but the crown jewel was a video Eddie had obtained from a security camera across the street from Club Paradise. It showed Vic and several city council members in what could only be described as a very compromising situation. This goes public, and it's over for all of them, Eddie said. Then let's make it public. We started with the local news blogs, sending anonymous tips with just enough evidence to get their attention. Then we moved to social media, creating fake accounts and posting carefully edited photos and videos. By noon, the story was spreading like wildfire. By evening, it was the top trending topic in the city. My phone rang around 8 o'clock. Unknown number. You're a dead man. Vic's voice was shaking with rage. Am I? You think you're smart posting that crap online? You have no idea what you've started. I know exactly what I've started, Vic. I'm finishing what you began when you decided to screw my wife. This isn't about your wife anymore. This is about you destroying my life. Good, now you know how it feels. I'm going to find you, Shane, and when I do, you're going to what? Send more guys with bats? Because that worked out so well last time. I'm going to end you myself. I laughed. You're welcome to try, but you might want to worry about your own problems first. I hear the IRS is very interested in your business practices. I hung up and turned on the local news. The lead story was about a federal investigation into corruption at City Hall, with Club Paradise mentioned as a central location in the scandal. Eddie called a few minutes later. You see the news? I'm watching it now. 3 city council members have already announced they're not seeking re-election. Judge Morrison is taking a leave of absence. And the mayor's office is claiming they had no knowledge of any illegal activities. What about the club? Closed as of an hour ago, federal agents, state police, the works. They're calling it a racketeering investigation. I felt a surge of satisfaction. And Vic? In the wind, nobody's seen him since this afternoon. He called me, made some threats. Shane, you need to be careful. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. I know. But Eddie, I'm not the same guy who got cornered. I'm the guy who does the cornering now. Just watch your back, okay? Always. I hung up and looked around my empty house. Lila was gone, Vic was running, and their whole operation was crumbling. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hungry for more. Because I'd learned something about myself over the past few weeks, something that should have scared me but didn't. I was good at this. Good at planning, good at executing, good at destroying people who deserve to be destroyed. And I wasn't ready to stop. 2 weeks after the federal raid on Club Paradise, I thought it was over. Vic had disappeared, the club was permanently closed, and half the city's political establishment was either under investigation or had resigned in disgrace. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. Eddie's voice was tight with worry. Shane, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves lawyers and court documents. Lila's back. My blood went cold. What do you mean back? She filed a motion to contest the divorce, claims you coerced her into signing the papers, that you threatened her, that the whole thing was signed under duress. That's BS. Maybe, but she's got a lawyer now, a good one, Grady Morrison, the judge's nephew, and they're claiming you used illegal surveillance to obtain evidence against her. I sat down heavily. Can they do that? They're doing it. Shane, there's more. They're also claiming domestic misuse. Lila showed up to court with bruises, saying you've been hitting her for months. I never touched her, not once. I know that, and you know that, but a jury might see it differently, especially if they paint you as an obsessed stalker who destroyed her business out of jealousy. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. They're asking for half of everything: the house, your retirement, your savings, and they want alimony, a lot of alimony. I felt the familiar cold rage building in my chest. She thinks she can come back and take everything? After what she did? Shane, you need to get down here. Now. We need to talk strategy. An hour later, I was sitting in Eddie's office, staring at a stack of legal documents that painted me as a harmful, controlling husband who had systematically destroyed his innocent wife's legitimate business. How is this possible? I asked. Good lawyers and better lies, Eddie replied. Grady Morrison is smart, and he's connected. He's turning your investigation into stalking, your evidence into illegal surveillance, and your justified anger into domestic violence. But we have proof, photos, financial records, witness testimony, all obtained through what they're calling illegal means. And here's the kicker. Some of it actually was illegal. That surveillance footage from across the street, the camera was on private property, and we didn't have permission to access it. So what are you saying? I'm saying they might win. Lila could walk away with half of everything you own, plus monthly alimony payments that would cripple you financially. I stared at the legal papers, feeling something dark and final settling in my chest. No. Shane, no. I'm not going to let her destroy me twice. I'm not going to spend the next 10 years paying for the privilege of being betrayed. What are you thinking? I looked at Eddie, my brother, the only person in the world I trusted completely. I'm thinking it's time to stop playing by their rules. Shane, whatever you're planning, don't. The legal system might be flawed, but it's still better than... Then what? Than justice? Because that's what this is about now, Eddie. Justice. Revenge isn't justice. Sometimes it's the only justice you get. That night, I sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by the evidence of Lila's betrayal, and made a decision that would have horrified the man I used to be. I was going to destroy her. Completely. Permanently. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. But I was going to be smart about it. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the courthouse. Lila's hearing was scheduled for 2 o'clock, which gave me time to prepare. I found Grady Morrison in the courthouse cafeteria, eating a sandwich and reviewing his notes. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of expensive suit and confident demeanor that screamed Ivy League education and family connections. Mr. Morrison, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He looked up, startled. Mr. Calloway, you shouldn't be talking to me without your attorney present. I don't have an attorney. Can't afford one, thanks to your client freezing my assets. That's not my problem. Actually, it is, because I've got something you need to see. I placed a manila envelope on the table between us. Photos of your client with Victor Renz. Very explicit photos. The kind that would make interesting evidence in a divorce proceeding. Grady's eyes narrowed. Are you trying to intimidate me? I'm trying to educate you. Your client isn't the innocent victim she's pretending to be. She's a liar, a cheat, and a criminal. And if you try to destroy me in court today, I'll make sure everyone knows it. You're threatening me. I'm informing you. There's a difference. I stood up and straightened my tie. See you in court, counselor. The hearing was a disaster. For them. Grady Morrison walked into that courtroom thinking he had an easy victory, a sympathetic client, a clear narrative, and a defendant who couldn't afford proper legal representation. What he didn't expect was for me to represent myself, and he definitely didn't expect me to be prepared. Your Honor, I said when it was my turn to speak, I'd like to present evidence that my wife's claims of misuse and coercion are completely fabricated. I handed a flash drive to the court clerk. This contains audio recordings of conversations between my wife and her business partner, Victor Renz, in which they discuss fabricating evidence against me. Lila went white. Grady Morrison jumped to his feet. Objection! This evidence was obtained illegally. Actually, emotionally, I said. It wasn't. These recordings were made in my own home, with equipment I legally purchased and installed. In this state, I have every right to record conversations that take place on my own property. The judge, not Morrison, thankfully, but Judge Patricia Harmon, who had a reputation for being tough on liars, reviewed the recordings with obvious interest. Mr. Morrison, she said finally, your client is clearly heard discussing how to fake bruises and coach witnesses to lie under oath. Would you care to explain? Grady looked like he'd swallowed a live fish. Your Honor, I was not aware of these recordings. I'm sure you weren't, but your client was certainly aware of the conversations. Mrs. Calloway, would you care to explain why you're discussing perjury on these tapes? Lila tried to speak, but no words came out. She looked at Grady, who was frantically shuffling through his papers, then back at the judge. It's not what it sounds like. It sounds like conspiracy to commit perjury, Judge Harmon said dryly. Mr. Calloway, do you have any other evidence you'd like to present? Yes, Your Honor. Financial records showing that my wife has been operating an illegal business for 2 years, hiding income from the IRS, and using the proceeds to fund an extramarital affair. I handed over Eddie's carefully organized files. Bank records, tax documents, photographs, witness statements, everything we'd gathered over the past month. Judge Harmon reviewed the evidence with growing displeasure. Mrs. Calloway, these documents suggest that you've been engaged in tax evasion, money laundering, and operating an illegal business. Is this accurate? Lila looked at Grady, who was now sweating profusely. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I see. Well, in that case, I'm dismissing your motion to contest the divorce. The original agreement stands. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Your Honor, Grady stammered, your client just admitted to criminal activity by invoking the Fifth Amendment in a civil proceeding. I suggest you advise her to get a criminal defense attorney because she's going to need one. I walked out of that courthouse, feeling better than I had in months. Lila's attempt to destroy me had backfired spectacularly. Not only was the divorce final, but she was now facing potential criminal charges for tax evasion and perjury. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, I made a series of phone calls. To the IRS, reporting Lila's unreported income. To the state attorney general, providing evidence of her illegal business activities. To every local news outlet, offering exclusive interviews about corruption in the city's legal system. By morning, Lila's face was on the front page of every newspaper in the state. Local woman charged with tax evasion and perjury in divorce case. The story detailed her involvement with Club Paradise, her relationship with Victor Renz, and her failed attempt to frame me for domestic misuse. Eddie called around noon. Jesus, Shane, you really did it. Did what? Destroyed her. Completely. She's finished in this city. Good. The FBI wants to talk to you about Vic, about the club, about everything. They're calling you a key witness in their racketeering investigation. I'll cooperate fully. Shane, are you okay? I mean, really okay? Because what you did in that courtroom, the way you planned all of this, it's impressive, but it's also kind of scary. I looked around my empty house, at the life I'd built and lost and reclaimed. I'm better than okay, Eddie. I'm free. And Vic, any word on him? Not yet. But he'll surface eventually. They always do. What will you do when he does? I smiled, and it felt like winter. I'll be ready. Victor Renz surfaced 3 months later, and when he did, he made the mistake of thinking I'd gone soft. I was having dinner at Rossetti's, a downtown restaurant that had become my regular spot since the divorce. Good food, quiet atmosphere, and a clear view of the street in case anyone decided to pay me an unwelcome visit. I was halfway through my pasta when I saw him walk in. Vic looked different, thinner, more desperate, with the kind of haunted expression that comes from months of looking over your shoulder. But he still had that arrogant swagger, that confidence that had convinced him he could steal my wife and destroy my life without consequences. He spotted me immediately and walked over to my table like he owned the place. Shane Calloway, he said, sliding into the seat across from me uninvited. We need to talk. Do we? I continued eating, not bothering to look up. I thought you'd left town for good. I did, but I came back to settle some business. What kind of business? The kind that involves you ruining my life. I finally looked at him. Up close, I could see the toll the past few months had taken. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his gold chains were gone, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I didn't ruin your life, Vic. I just exposed what you really were. You destroyed everything I built. My nightclub, my reputation, my business relationships. Do you have any idea what that cost me? About as much as what you cost me, I'd imagine. Vic leaned forward, and I could smell alcohol in his breath. I lost everything because of you. My business, my money, my connections. I've been living in cheap motels, dodging creditors and federal agents, all because you couldn't handle the fact that your wife preferred a real man. I set down my fork and looked at him calmly. Is that what you think this is about? Jealousy? What else would it be? Justice, consequences. The simple fact that actions have results and you finally had to face yours. Bees. This is about your wounded ego. I laughed. You know what's funny, Vic? You still don't get it. You think this was personal, but it wasn't. It was business. You took something that belonged to me, so I took everything that belonged to you. Basic economics. You're insane. I'm practical. And speaking of practical matters, what exactly do you want? Vic reached into his jacket, and for a moment I tensed, wondering if he was armed. But he pulled out a thick envelope instead. I want to make a deal. What kind of deal? I've got information about Lila, about the club, about things you don't know, things that would interest the FBI, such as names, dates, financial records, evidence of corruption that goes all the way to the state capitol. I considered this, and in exchange, you call off the dogs, tell the feds you were wrong about me, that I was just an employee, not a partner. Help me disappear for good. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. A vindictive psychopath who destroyed dozens of lives just to get revenge on his cheating wife. I smiled. Vic, do you really think I care what people think about me at this point? You should, because I've got evidence too. Photos of you vandalizing my car. Testimony from Terry about you hitting him with a nail tool. Proof that you've been stalking and harassing me for months. Interesting theory. Got any proof that would hold up in court? I've got enough. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. You know what I think, Vic? I think you're bluffing. I think you've got nothing but desperation and empty threats. Try me. I don't think I need to, because here's what's really going to happen. You're going to finish your drink, walk out of here, and disappear forever. And if you ever come back to this city, if you ever contact me again, if you ever so much as think about threatening me, I'll finish what I started. You can't touch me. Not anymore. Can't I? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. One phone call, Vic. One call to Agent Martinez at the FBI, and you'll be in federal custody within an hour. They've been looking for you for months. His face went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other across the table, and I could see the exact moment when he realized he'd lost. His shoulders sagged, and the fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. Nothing. You're already finished, Vic. You just haven't figured it out yet. I could disappear, leave the state, change my name, start over somewhere else, and you could, but you won't. Why not? Because men like you never learn. You'll surface somewhere else, start another scheme, hurt other people, and eventually someone like me will stop you permanently. Vic stood up slowly, his hands shaking. This isn't over. Yes, it is. It's been over since the day you decided to screw my wife. Everything that's happened since then has just been the consequences catching up. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, Shane, I'm sorry about Lila, about everything. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. After he left, I finished my dinner in peace. Through the restaurant window, I could see Vic walking down the street, probably heading back to whatever Fleabag motel he was calling home these days. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Agent Martinez, this is Shane Calloway. I just had an interesting conversation with Victor Renz. Yes, that Victor Renz. He's at Rossetti's restaurant on 5th Street, probably heading east on foot. You might want to hurry. I hung up and signaled the waitress for the check. By the time I'd paid and walked outside, I could see the FBI cars converging on the area, their red and blue lights painting the evening sky. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same restaurant, reading the newspaper over coffee. The headline read, "Local Man Sentenced to Federal Prison in Corruption Scandal." The article detailed Victor Renz's conviction on charges of racketeering, money laundering, and tax evasion. He'd been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Lila had gotten 5 years for her role in the operation, plus substantial fines and restitution payments. She'd tried to plea bargain, offering to testify against Vic in exchange for a lighter sentence, but the federal prosecutors had enough evidence without her cooperation. I folded the newspaper and looked out the window at the city I'd helped clean up. The corrupt politicians were gone, the illegal businesses were closed, and the people responsible were paying for their crimes. Eddie had been right about one thing. I had become someone I didn't recognize. The old Shane Calloway would never have been capable of the systematic destruction I'd orchestrated. He would have been too decent, too forgiving, too willing to turn the other cheek. But the old Shane was gone, ended by betrayal and humiliation. The new Shane was harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to people who thought they could take advantage of him. I paid for my coffee and walked outside into the cool evening air. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work, back to my normal life as a construction project manager. But I'd never be the same man I was before, and that was perfectly fine with me. Some people are born predators. Others have predation thrust upon them. I'd learned that I belonged to the second category, and the knowledge was both liberating and terrifying. As I walked home through the quiet streets, I thought about justice, revenge, and the thin line between them. I'd crossed that line months ago and never looked back. Lila had taken off her rings, thinking it would free her to live a double life. Instead, it had freed me to become someone who could destroy lives as efficiently as she'd destroyed mine. The old Shane would have called it a tragedy. The new Shane called it justice.